In Canada, I always like to hear from Doreen. Go ahead, Doreen.
Oh, hi, George. Good to speak to you again.
And you, go ahead, my dear.
All these years, George, how you have stuck by the Palestinians and helped them, and it just doesn't seem to stop, and nobody seems to help them. I thought there was a light at the end of the tunnel when the people were out in the streets protesting, and I was thinking of those little babies that had their heads blown off and everything else, and the media doesn't show that. It shows the beheadings of the people, of those journalists all the time, but it doesn't show those little babies in Palestine that was brutally murdered. And that is what's happening here. Every time I hear it's against international law, nothing is done by it. You see Ban Ki-moon going into Gaza saying this is disgraceful and against international law, but then what happens about it? Nothing happens, because all the prime ministers, presidents, or whatever heads of countries, they must have children, George, and they still support Israel, and they come out and say, we support Israel, even in the House of Commons. And then how can the world support children being murdered like that? It's not right, George. And then you were talking about that boat, those 9 people were killed. What about the U.S. Liberty that in 1967, when 34 Marines lost their lives through Israel bombing their boat? That kind of stuff has just been declassified. And now we're learning about what happened there, where the President of the United States covered up that U.S. Liberty thing. So what can we do, George? I just want to know. I keep thinking there may be peace at the end of the tunnel, but it doesn't seem to be. They just keep going.
Well, Doreen, there will never be peace without justice. No justice, no peace. And the terms of justice for the Palestinian people are clear. First of all, they must get their country back. Second, those who've been driven out of their country and are living in exile as refugees or exile in different parts of the world, including in Canada, including in Britain, must have the right to return to their land. They must have the right to return to their home. They must have the right to live as equal citizens in a state which is accountable to them, a democratic state where Muslims and Christians and Jews can live as equal citizens under the law. That's why I support the idea of one state between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea, which is a state in which every citizen lives equally. You're right that Israel is, as Dr. Norman Finkelstein called it, actually a lunatic state. It is like a lunatic which has broken out of the asylum and murders people at will around the world, and the world continues to support them. Let me give just one example, or I could be all night with you, Doreen. In Dubai, a Palestinian leader was murdered by a gang of 50 Israeli Mossad operators, every one of them traveling on a stolen passport belonging to friendly countries to Israel. The Mossad representative in London was deported, but on the return flight flew in the new Mossad representative, and he's now presumably still sitting in Kensington in London as the Mossad representative in Britain, even though that murder was carried out in part with stolen British passports. There is no crime that Israel can commit, it would seem, that will not bring the kind of accountability that would be normal with any other state. I mentioned Iraq earlier. Iraq was broken on the wheel of sanctions, invasion, and occupation for crimes it didn't actually even commit. There were no weapons of mass destruction. But Iraq was destroyed on the charge that there were weapons of mass destruction. But Israel has hundreds of weapons of mass destruction. Israel is occupying other people's land. It is carrying out massacres of people living under its military occupation. It is changing the demography of its occupied territories in absolute brazen defiance of international law which forbids such a thing. But the answer lies with us, Doreen. The Palestinian people can't do this on their own. Even the Arabs together are unlikely to be able to do it on their own, certainly with the political leadership that they currently have. But your country, Canada, and my country, Britain, are two of the main backers of these crimes committed by Israel. And we need to change public opinion in your country and in mine and in the United States and France and elsewhere, so that politicians can no longer write blank checks for the Israeli leadership. Doreen, it was great to hear from you again. Let's go to the UK and talk to Mo on the Saudi Arabian question. Mo, welcome.